Well, you heard there the US witnessing a historic end to the Democratic Party's four-day national convention. Kamala Harris has become the first Black and Asian American woman to lead a major party ticket in the country.
On behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
Ms. Harris delivered a deeply personal 40-minute speech in Chicago where she vowed to prioritize the fight for the middle class and women's reproductive freedom. She slammed her rival, Republican nominee Donald Trump, as being out for himself and not voters. Ms. Harris also accused Trump of wanting to be a dictator.
I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un who are rooting for Trump. Because, they know he is easy to manipulate with flattery and favors. They know Trump won't hold autocrats accountable because he wants to be an autocrat himself.
China, against which America has intense rivalries on several fronts, including trade and technology, also on the Democrats' radar.
I will make sure that we lead the world into the future on space and artificial intelligence, that America, not China, wins the competition for the 21st century, and that we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership.
Well, let's get more analysis. We're joined by Christopher Phelps, Associate Professor of American History at the University of Nottingham. Professor Phelps, now, the Democratic Convention, they're telling Americans about patriotism, about joy and freedom. What did we learn about Harris's policies?
Yeah, the convention was kaleidoscope of different celebrities and musicians and politicians, but a common theme across the 4 days was to pit Harris as a highly competent prosecutor, person of integrity and honesty, against Trump, who, although the clips that you found did emphasize his autocratic bent. The convention, interestingly enough, mostly emphasized his smallness and his instability. And so you have something of a shift, for the most part, away from the Biden theme, which was going to very much emphasize democracy against autocracy. Harris herself and all of the convention has mostly been about Trump as a kind of small man. The policy details, well, we got a sense of her broad sketch continuation of Biden administration policies, really. And it's not the kind of thing where she lays out in great detail everything about the policies.
So what you're saying is that we will assume that the voters would need a greater level of substance to vet and vote. So what you're saying is that when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the economy, for example, we can infer a continuation of Biden's policies.
Yes. I mean, she was very clear on immigration that she supported the bipartisan bill that had been negotiated about a year ago between some conservative Republicans and the Biden administration, that then was killed because Trump instructed his supporters in Congress to vote against it for the simple reason that he thought immigration might then be taken off the table as a campaign issue that would hurt his campaign. So we know she's actually going to be tough on immigration if elected. And on the economy, she did give a speech 5 days ago or so, end of last week, in which she laid out some new proposals, including grants for first-time homeowners and caps on price gouging in emergency situations like hurricanes and so forth. And so she's sketching some things, but yeah, it's all very provisional and not entirely clear yet.
Okay, I want to circle back to the sketches, as you mentioned. But first, let's talk a bit more about the strengths and weaknesses of Harris-Waltz pairing versus Trump-Vance, especially when it comes to resonating with swing states.
Yeah, that's an important point on swing states because, as you know, if we go back to 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. But you have to win the critically important battleground states, the states that aren't red states or blue states, they're, say, purple states. And there are about 7 of those in this election. And it's very much neck and neck in those states. The average of the polls does put Harris ahead now in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And she's likely to get an even bigger bounce coming out of the convention. That's a traditional thing that happens. We won't know that until next week. But, you know, Trump's ahead in Georgia. And Arizona is too close to call. So, and all of these states could, within the next 2 months, tip another way. So we won't know until Election Day how this comes out.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk a bit then about foreign policy. Jake Sullivan, he's making his first trip to China as the U.S. National Security Advisor next week. Now, China will undoubtedly be asking him what many of us are asking: what does a Biden to Harris handover look like if she wins? So I guess the question is, can Harris afford not to prioritize Asia in light of such sensitive issues like the South China Sea, Taiwan?
No, I think she'll see China as very important. I mean, interestingly enough, she has never been to China, but she picked a running mate, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who's also been a congressman, who very young in life, around 1990, was a teacher for a time in Guangdong province, and who has been back to China 30 times since then and knows China inside out. And, you know, he's got a position that's, given how China plays in American politics these days, in which there's quite a bit of suspicion, if not outright hostility, in both parties toward China, and a more and more hawkish kind of tone. Waltz is interesting, and he will be influential, I think, on these questions. He has a position that is very much one of emphasizing human rights and democracy. He's a critic of the Chinese Communist Party, and yet at the same time, he believes that this is a partnership, even if a difficult partnership, and he has been for constructive trade engagement. And at the same time, I think they'll also have those security concerns about the South China Sea. So I see this as a continuation of the Biden administration's policy on China, perhaps with some modulations, and it will benefit from Waltz's expertise on China. I mean, he knows far more about China than most Americans, and has seen it up close and understands Chinese culture.
All right. You know, I did want to get back to those sketches that she must certainly color in fairly soon, but we've run out of time. But I do want to thank you, Christopher Phelps from the University of Nottingham.